Hey everyone, welcome back for part two of my discussion of Marianne Williamson's natal chart and transits. I so appreciate you taking some of your valuable time to spend with me here. If you end up liking this video, please hit the like button. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did subscribe. And if you can hit that notifications bell, that really helps the video to get seen more broadly. And of course, if you know anyone that would appreciate this, it'd be fantastic if you could share it with them. And so I hope you're all getting really excited about Marianne Williamson being in this presidential race. And I really hope you spread the buzz. She needs that buzz to be buzzing for the rest of this month of August. Really, it's really important. She needs to get to 2% in the polls. So talk about her with your friends on social media and get the word out there. So I hope you enjoy this second part. Blessings, everyone. Okay, I'm back. And we're going to look at Marianne Williamson's transits, which is when we look at where the planets are today in the sky and compare them geometrically to where they were when Marianne was born, in this case. And so you have to imagine that I'm using the metaphor of time waves. I do think each planet radiates a certain frequency, and it has a certain way of influencing time, as Einstein demonstrated, that each planet with its gravity has a impact on the whole solar system, of course. And so for me, I imagine like ocean waves kind of flowing from each of the planets and waves that your soul is attracted to. And you have the impulse to dive in and catch those waves and see where they carry you, what amazing timeline possibilities those time waves are. And some people have interesting tastes in time waves. I mean, we all do. But some are attracted to certain kinds of energies and others to different ones at different times in the evolutionary journey of the soul. Marianne was attracted to this incredible heart chakra portal and revolutionary lover portal. And so the time waves of her birth are forming, like you can imagine, interference patterns with the time waves of now. Or we should say, the time waves of now are interacting with the time waves of her birth and creating interference patterns. Isn't the best term. It's like they're fluidly, lovingly, potentially combining with a certain kind of unique potency for each person at each individual moment in time. Different potentials are there. And I think there's a consciousness about this in the universe. And so there are these unique moments where it's like these powers of time combine and create possibilities for the human soul, the human psyche. And when I look at Marianne's transits, I see some really powerful stuff happening. And it's complex. You know, we could talk for hours about what's going on here. My intention is to try to talk in minutes in a kind of succinct way. That's my intention. And so what I think I want to do first, actually, is I must read another quote from her, a long quote. I'm just going to read the whole thing. It was her post the other day after, I believe it was a post after the second horrific shooting here in Dayton and El Paso. Here's what she says on Instagram under a picture of Sally from The Simpsons, saying Marianne Williamson is the most effective candidate at addressing the root cause of the issues. And here's what she writes. Once again, a tragedy, and once again, people talking about the things we need to be talking about, but that don't ever really get to the heart of the matter. Yes, we need gun control. Yes, we need more mental health services. Yes, we need prayer. But there is something more, something that the ego mind, that's the sun, right? And her sun has such an amazing capacity to, I mean, the energy of her birth has this capacity, that time moment, for a kind of breaking free and a dissolving of the limitations of the ego to have a more transcendent vision of the possible. Yes, we need prayer, but there is something more, something that the ego mind doesn't really want to delve into. America needs a new operating system. We need a shift in both perception and politics, a fundamental shift from fear to love, and political changes that align with it. We are called in our generation to completely rethink the way we organize our society. We all understand that only love, Venus, casts out fear. But when you actually start applying that love in a political sense, some people have a hard time embracing it. That is why I talk about the millions of traumatized children in America, because the lovelessness expressed by that circumstance is a petri dish out of which will emerge societal dysfunction. Same with our economic policies, racial policies, environmental policies, international policies, etc. Too many of them are loveless, and where there's lovelessness, there will inevitably be chaos. That is a law of nature. It is not woo-woo. It is not wacky. It is not New Age. It is the truth at the heart of every great religious and spiritual tradition. It is a psychological and societal truth. Yet some people would rather die than change their mind. They would rather resist than open their minds to a truth beyond what they had considered before. They would rather snicker than surrender to a truth that is bigger than they are. They would rather continue on a downward spiral, no matter how dark and dangerous that spiral gets, than consider the possibility that there might be another way. Yet we must consider another way and do everything in our power to make it manifest. That's her Saturn Neptune. The visioning of another way. Her Neptune Uranus is the capacity to awaken to a new vision of radical possibilities. And on her sun, like radiating it, shining with it. But the Saturn Neptune is taking the vision and making it manifest. The cycle of time that has to do with manifestation, bringing in a vision, channeling the possibilities and making them real, as Marianne has done in her pragmatic, actual, on-the-ground, visionary service to those in need. Yet we must consider another way and do everything in our power to make it manifest. It isn't simply that love is the answer, it is the only answer in politics as well as everywhere else. So please sign up and join the campaign at Marianne2020.com. We will put you to work wherever you are. We are forging a new path and imagining, Neptune, a kinder Venus way. Nothing less than that will create the possibility of a new Uranus and better world. The visionary world of love, kindness, a sense that we are all connected on a soul level, on a cosmic level, and that the hoarding of resources of the 0.0001% and the denial of clean food and water and shelter to all human beings through greed, that is what must change. And so now turning to her transits, I think we must look at the Saturn Pluto conjunction of our moment in history, incredibly profound new cycle of time beginning, The last time these were in alignment was 1981 to 84, especially 1982 and 83. That's a long time ago. The collective psyche is in a process of reflection on how have we been doing with facing and healing trauma. Saturn Pluto has a lot to do with trauma, has to do with oppression, it has to do with darkness. When she's talking about dark psychic forces, when anybody brings up the kind of concept of a force of darkness or evil that works through evil people and evil visions and evil systems. Of course, that's a philosophical question, the nature of evil. It seems to have to do with this cycle of time and how darkness seems to be more visible when this cycle is most activated. And this is a healing force. It's actually a mechanism of healing that exists in consciousness, where over time there are cycles of awareness, mindfulness of shadow and the potential for acting it out and projecting it. This is what, well, it's one of the things that's very powerful about this cycle of time. And so there was one other thing I was going to say there. Facing the shadow. Yes. And so we consider, how has shadow, darkness, dark psychic forces, how are they being healed? How are we doing there? She's talking about doing a fearless and thorough moral inventory. It's a time to check in. How are we doing as a earth together? How are we doing as a nation together when it comes to the shadow? Are we doing better? Where can we do better? Especially in the areas of the darkest things that happen in history. War, genocide, slavery, the victimization and objectification, commodification of human beings, the incredible abuse of different populations and violence towards them, and the exploitation of whole groups of people. We're seeing the sexual exploitation that has been so dominant in the world. And yet it's important to recognize the successes. There are ways in which different parts of the world are overcoming shadow. They are doing moral inventories. This is a moment in the American psyche where we are looking at all of this, and we have the potential for healing it. We can look at the history of Native American genocide and slavery, and we can own it, and we can try to make amends and restitutions, and through that process evolve to a more just society. So Saturn Pluto seems to have a lot to do with all of this, and we could go into in depth how this alignment is right on her Sun and Uranus and Venus and square Neptune. Pluto's been going across her Sun for a few years, this whole thing for a few years. And so what does Pluto do? It evolves, it empowers, it deepens, it transforms. It gives access to the forces of nature. She's talking about these forces of nature, that love is a force of nature, that healing is a force of nature, that we either are participatory in, or we obstruct it, we fight it, we resist it, we get stuck with it. And so I think she's suggesting that we can cooperate with nature and these powers of consciousness. That's Pluto-Neptune. Pluto-Neptune is like evolution of consciousness, transformation of consciousness, deepening of consciousness. With Uranus, it's revolutionary. On the Sun, it it empowers the radiant voice of something new, someone new, a voice that is new, a love force that is surprising and new and powerful. I mean, for me, as a deeply committed spiritual human being, and I hope participating in the democracy of this nation to the degree that I can, I feel there's just an inevitability of love overcoming whatever shadow, dark forces are active. And it just is that force of peace and love that ultimately is so much more potent than hate and darkness and, if we can call it, evil, where we act out the worst of what's possible. So, I mean, this is an amazing alignment for someone who might be empowered on a collective level to be a force of love, to face the forces of darkness. There is an inevitability that the forces of love will come in and try to address evil and do it in a non-violent way that comes from the heart, that is inherently kind. And again, this is happening in many people on a collective level, and I think we're going to see more and more leaders that are embodying this love force. Of course, someone like the Dalai Lama, who has been an advocate for peace and nonviolence and a kind of meta loving kindness approach to transformation. And I think Marianne has the kind of chart that is very consistent with this way of being, and the parts of her chart that have to do with that are being transited by this profound moment in the Saturn Pluto cycle of time, that she could be a channel of that gravitas and a vehicle of a collective, fearless, moral inventory. This makes things serious. I mean, she's dealing with incredibly powerful forces that are now going to be arrayed against her, and yet at the same time she's being empowered to face them as she does so well. So there's that. We could go further into it, but I want to point out, and here let's go a month at a time forward just to see what's going to happen here. So Pluto right now is exactly opposite her Venus, 1 degree, but it's moving towards her moon. It's already gotten close enough to be a Pluto-moon conjunction last year, even the year before. A once in 250-year conjunction from Pluto to any part of the chart. We're talking about the rarest and most potent initiation of time that can happen. Initiation of a certain quality of time that demands a kind of strength and fortitude to stand up to the darkness, basically, to the underworld. Pluto has to do with the underworld and the shadow. And so to have Pluto going across this huge part of her chart is to face the shadow within herself, but also to be a mediator of that process on a collective level. As Pluto is empowerment. And so just having Pluto's sun is just a mass scale empowerment of the individual and their authenticity and their authentic role, their authentic mission. Pluto is that force of nature that awakens the powers of the human psyche, activates the kundalini, raises the energy. You see it when people just are overtaken by a force that compels them to engage with their mission on an extremely deep level. And so she's getting the empowerment of Pluto to her sun, Pluto to her Venus, the empowerment of the love force, the channeling of the love force, the idea of love as a force of nature. Pluto is the forces of nature. The likelihood with these Pluto transits that she might have a very strong impulse to express love for nature and a protective impulse towards nature. And of course, the way in which human beings are an expression of nature. as Pluto moves more onto her moon, this is the archetype of like the empowerment of the feminine. And if we go forward month by month here, you can see that Pluto moves. Here it's 6 degrees. This is January. As we get into primary season, she's getting a once in 250 year transit of Pluto sitting on her moon, as well as Saturn. This is like the ultimate alignment of the powerful, strong feminine that doesn't back down, that is protective, that draws upon the forces of nature to express a mother force, that's the moon, a caring force, a nurturing force. With Saturn on the moon coming in, the capacity to be like a protective mother, the protective feminine that wants to protect women and children and the vulnerable. Pluto moon is like the feminine version of deep shamanic energy, deep life force energy expressed in a caring, protective way. And so I think it's a striking transit, a sequence of transits that is very consistent, I would say, with her being empowered on a national scale. She's been that in terms of her bestsellers and being on television on Oprah. We need somebody with that experience to go up against our president. And as Pluto comes onto her moon, that's like, I feel like in some ways it's a kind of Kali mother energy that's just so potent. It transforms with the power of the feminine in a way that's very intense. The force of the feminine, of a protective mother. And so we could talk a lot about this. Pluto coming onto her moon. It's going to be there so strong in the coming years. The likelihood that she will continue to be a force in the political arena and also face the resistance there, the very strong resistance to a voice, a humanitarian voice that wants to bring food and water and shelter as a human right to all. That is a very resisted idea on a political level. However, I feel as she contributes to the national conversation, just like how Bernie Sanders just was propelled to this level of powerful communication, a communication on a national level where he's giving voice to these new principles, these democratic socialist principles, also very humanitarian principles that he has shifted the whole Democratic Party, as Elizabeth Warren is doing as well, towards a much more progressive end of the spectrum. I see Marianne having her own version of that, starting a conversation, a kind of conversation that we haven't had on a serious, a spiritually mature level like I feel she is bringing. And, okay, I'm going to come back to this current moment and just point out two more things here. Look at where Jupiter is. It's coming on to it, and has been right on her, what's called the descendant, which often represents a kind of energy that comes into your interpersonal field. And because that part of the chart has to do with other people, it's the relationship part of the chart, where you draw in certain kinds of relational energy, and also how you're transformed by relationships. And so to have Jupiter right there is very nice for a time period where she's really being greeted by success and elevation and a kind of positive energy in her environment, in her interpersonal life, a kind of celebration and joy that could be coming in. And so if we look let's see. I want to just look again, just look at where Jupiter goes this next year. I mean, you can see that it's going to go right opposite her sun, Uranus, Venus. It's actually going to go back and forth as basically this Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, extremely rare, extremely powerful alignment that I'll do a future video on, that indicates an incredibly dramatic political season as we would expect in our experiencing, and just, in my opinion, just going to get bigger and bigger. And I think the political drama of next year could be on a historic scale, and that it's this alignment that has to do with that is coming so strongly on the one hand, her sun and Venus and Uranus, and also on her moon, just to me suggests that she's going to be very much in play in whatever's happening. And so Jupiter continues to go forward here. Let's just see. Like right there at 25. So actually, you can see this whole alignment just comes right onto our moon. I'm very curious what that might look like. I envision, and let's all envision together. Let's go forward in our imagination to next November. And it's like we're seeing her in the success of the election. How should I put that? We're seeing election night, the celebration around her. And let's even think about it in the past. It's so amazing how Marianne won. It's so amazing how she went up against such incredible forces and was triumphant. And that's white magic. And so it's amazing how she did during the election season. She triumphed in spite of everything. Wow. That timeline is amazing. That timeline exists. We can all envision it together and influence it on a collective consciousness scale. And so I think it would be amazing to see what she's able to channel under this kind of alignment to her moon, a kind of force of the feminine that can stand up to the forces of darkness, to patriarchy, and win. So a lot more could be said there. One more thing I'm going to point out, and this is that the planet Uranus, let's come back to now, Uranus in the sky is coming onto that amazing part of her chart that's just killer communicator. I didn't mean to use the word killer. That's not the best. An amazing communicator, a powerful communicator. An amazing capacity to stand up and assert a perspective, a higher moral perspective. That's Jupiter. And so right now, Uranus is right opposite her Mars and within range of squaring her Mercury. Uranus-Mars is the revolutionary warrior, the fighting for change, the taking action to bring a revolution. And it's an amazing alignment to have for someone having this kind of vision to fight for a radical renewal of the American democratic system. And so that's an amazing one to have. And it's starting to square her Mercury, which gives a capacity for communication that's exciting, that's awakening, that's liberating. And so that's really interesting. And it's moving towards Jupiter. Once an 84-year transit, Uranus conjunct Jupiter. This is definitely a kind of revolution, a breakthrough revolutionary, the successful revolution. That's Jupiter, Uranus. And so I think you can see that these are very interesting transits, the astrologers out there. And so there's other things, like Neptune you can see is trining her sun, Venus, Uranus. That's a once-in-a-lifetime transit that just amplifies all the spiritual gifts that she has, her capacity to channel spiritual love. And so with that, I am going to ring a bell, and send so many well wishes and blessings to Marianne Williamson and all of her support team and all of the guidance that she's receiving from masters that know exactly how to win this race. Let's envision that. Let's envision all kinds of support coming her way on all levels, and from the unexpected people that are awakening right now and have gifts to contribute. And so I hope everyone will contribute financially that are able to, and in other ways that you can be of service within your limitations. And so, Marianne, thank you for being who you are. I feel love for you. I'm tremendously excited that you're in the national conversation in a very strong way. And so, blessings to you. And that is all. I didn't ring the bell. Blessings.